In this video, I'm going to share with you the steps to calculate a student's ACT score. We're going to go over why students should even calculate their score or know what their score is. We're going to talk about how to calculate the score and then how we can use the score. When you've been in the ACT world, whether it be taking the test or helping others to prepare for the test, you may think it's obvious how to calculate the score, but think about your students that have never taken the test before. They may think it's a complicated calculation to determine that score. They just don't know. So here is something you need to go over with all your students to make sure they understand, because we can use the score as a tool to help them get better. Now, this is going to be helpful for students who have also already taken the test and they've gotten a score report, because we're doing the same thing. We're working practice questions. We're working maybe practice tests in a semi-test environment, but getting that score and being able to calculate and see where they are, see where they can make improvements, that is very important. So those are some reasons why it's important that we know how to calculate the score. Now let's take a look at the material that we get with ACT reporting that can determine what the scores are and then how we can calculate the overall cumulative score. So usually in the back of any kind of practice ACT that you will get this kind of report here that gives you the explanation for scoring. But what's important down here is going to give you a scale score based on the raw scores in each of the sections. Now, this is for material as of fall of 2024, and what I mean by that is we have 4 test sections: English, math, reading, and science. And the word is that science is going to become optional, and in the future we would not use this in our cumulative score. But for now, we're including these 4 sections, and I'm going to show you how you can determine the score from this chart. So let's say for a student on the English section, they got 65 of the questions correct. So I would go down the column for English until I find 65, and then over to really the left or the right, but the left side is closest, we see that that's going to give them a 28 in English. And so if we wanted to use this form up here, we could write a 28. Now, let's say for mathematics, they got 53 questions correct in math. That's going to give them a 32 for math. On the reading section, let's say they got 34 correct. That's going to give them a 30 for reading. And for the science section, let's say they got 32 correct. That's going to give them a 27. So we have each of the subscores of the 4 sections. We're going to take those and add those up, and we get a total for this example of 117. Then we take the 117, divide it by 4. We're just getting an average, and we get 29.25. So we have a decimal point here, and what the rule is from when they're doing the calculation, we're rounding up if it's above 50. Less than that, we're going to go down to the whole number if it's below 50. So a 29.25 is going to give a score of 29. That information is helpful. But now here's the piece that we're going to use to help us to use this information in our prep. So now your student has been working practice questions, they've been working full-length practice tests, and they have a score that they're working with, whether it be a first-time student or one that's taken the test before, but hopefully they can see some improvement. And if not, they can look at areas where they're going to continue doing practice tests, get scores, and hopefully they will improve. But it's giving them an idea of where they're headed and how they may do when they actually take the real test. Okay, here's another powerful way of using the score. When you show a student the what-if scenarios, and let's take a look at that back with our practice score sheet. Over here with our practice score sheet, we found that this student made a 29.25, which would round down to a 29. But let's say this student really wants to get at least a 30. So what improvements could they make? Knowing that the score is made from an average, we can really look at the average. If we know that we want to make a 30, but for rounding purposes, we know We know that they want to make a 30. For rounding purposes, a 29.5 or more would round up to a 30. So we could take the 29.5, and if we multiply that by 4, that gives us 118. They need subscores to equal out to 118 to give them this 29.5, which would round to 30. They're at 117. So we need one more point in any of these 4 scaled areas as long as they maintain these scores as well. So let's take a look. Let's just say in English, instead of making a 28, if they made a 29, well, how many would they need to get correct? So to get a scaled score of 29 in English, they need to get 66 correct, and they had 65. We're talking about one more question would have pushed them over the edge to get that 30. What about in math? They had, with a 32, they had 53 correct. To get a 33, they need 54. And so that's, again, one. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 questions that they would have to get right. But in this case, for this particular one, we're talking 1 or 2 questions more, and they can hit their goal. And so that's what I like to show my students is they're so close, and it can vary from test to test. But knowing how they perform, they can get a lot of information from this. Now, in addition, with the math, there could actually be some questions very similar to this that we see. Calculating averages, figuring out if you have a missing test score, what you need to make in order to get some final grade, that sort of thing. So, hey, we're getting math practice in while we're doing scores for their practice questions. For some students, another area that's important based on the college that they're choosing for college and scholarships are super scores. And super scores are going to be calculated in a similar way. So we're going to talk about super scores in a future video, so be on the lookout for that.